There's a very interesting mood going on at the moment in the Kremlin and the White House, and it's all about the blame game. It's about apportioning blame and trying to save face by explaining how the war in Ukraine started. Vladimir Putin's latest narrative twist that the war in Ukraine might have been avoided if Donald Trump hadn't lost the 2020 US election, a loss Putin continues to characterize, parroting Trump as the result of a stolen election. This peculiar blame game between two world leaders, both known for their unconventional rhetoric and rising testosterone, raises critical questions about accountability, global politics, and the art of rewriting history. But the impression that is being given is that Putin and Trump are both looking for an exit strategy. In a televised interview, and that's a positive, by the way, in a televised interview, Putin suggested that Trump's presidency could have prevented the Ukraine crisis, attributing the war to a lack of respect for Joe Biden's leadership. And that's something that I suppose Trump and Putin would agree about. That and whether or not they can both fit in the same Smeg fridge. This statement aligns conveniently with Trump's long-standing claim that his strength would have deterred Putin from invading. But this narrative feels less like historical analysis and more like political opportunism. Putin has a vested interest in fostering division within the US political system, and by reinforcing Trump's election fraud claims, he sows seeds of distrust in American democracy. Moreover, his proposal to meet Trump based on the realities of today is as much a jab at Biden's administration as it is an appeal to Trump's ego. Trump, for his part, has long claimed he could end the war in 24 hours if returned to the White House. This magical timeline seems detached from reality and detached from the complexities of Putin's demands, which include Ukrainian neutrality, NATO concessions, the lifting of sanctions, and, of course, the possession of the land that he's stolen. Trump's threats of tariffs and sanctions against Russia feel hollow when recalling his tepid response to Putin's earlier aggression, such as the annexation of Crimea in 2014. His strongman posturing conveniently ignores his history of appeasement towards Putin. Unsurprisingly, Ukrainian President Zelensky dismissed Putin's comments as manipulative. Zelensky astutely pointed out that Putin's rhetoric attempts to exploit Trump's desire for a political win while sidelining the voices of Ukraine and its European allies. Andriy Yermak, head of Zelensky's office, warned that Putin's vision of negotiations without Europe and without Ukraine is fundamentally disconnected from modern global reality. Putin's claim hinges on a hypothetical that Trump's transactional diplomacy could have secured peace, yet the Ukraine war was not a sudden outburst, but a culmination of years of Russian imperial ambition. A Nova Russia! And Putin's broader objectives, eroding NATO, dominating Eastern Europe, reasserting Russian influence, predate Biden and Trump alike. Blaming Biden for Putin's invasion obscures the context and ignores the agency of a leader who orchestrated the conflict. Moreover, Putin's economic arguments ring hollow. While the sanctions have undeniably strained Russia, his regime remains committed to prolonging the war. As analyst Tatiana Stanovaya notes, a peace deal on Russia's terms would save resources, but Putin seems convinced that he can outlast Western resolve. What we're witnessing is a mutual blame game that conveniently absolves both leaders of accountability. For Trump, the claim that his absence caused the war bolsters his mythos as a global savior. For Putin, amplifying Trump's election grievances undermines US credibility and distracts from Russian culpability. But this symbiosis has its limits. While Trump flirts with economic ultimatums, his rhetoric towards Putin is increasingly sharp, reflecting his unpredictable approach. For Moscow, this is a double-edged sword. Trump's potential return might bring relief from Biden's sanctions-heavy strategy, but it could also introduce chaos. This narrative tug-of-war is political theatre, with Ukraine paying the price, potentially. It's an exercise in reshaping history to serve personal ambitions of Trump, of Putin. Trump's assertion that resistance was futile undermines Ukraine's sovereignty, while Putin's alignment with Trump's election grievances reveals his enduring focus on destabilizing the West. Ultimately, the war in Ukraine is neither Biden's fault nor Trump's hypothetical triumph. It is Putin's war, driven by Putin's imperialist ambitions and enabled by years of global complacency, enabling Putin's perversity. To suggest otherwise is simply revisionist history. It's dangerously misleading. As the icicles drop from the nose of Putin's frozen features, and Putin edges out of the Smeg fridge to face the world again. And that perhaps is the most cynical manipulation of all. Putin is playing a game. Do not be distracted by the games of Putin. The voice from beyond the grave calls out. It's like Dracula. Just when you thought Christopher Lee was dead, he comes back in a sequel. But as the sequels go on, Dracula, Christopher Lee's Dracula, if you remember, said less and less because there wasn't anything left to say. And Putin ought to recognize that there's less and less that he can say, either because he's dead and stuck in a Smeg fridge, or because he's afraid and hiding in a cellar, or because he's simply outlasted his time, because he needs to be replaced, because he's messed up so monumentally. Even Russia recognizes that life without Putin would be significantly better.